From MTN, the Montana Television Network, this is Face the State.
Hello and thanks for joining us for Face the State. I'm Melissa Jensen. E-cigarettes are now the most commonly used tobacco product among youth in the U.S. and in Montana. The use of e-cigarettes has skyrocketed in recent years, with steps being taken nationally in recent months to try and curb marketing of the devices to young people, as well as their availability. Here's a look at what we currently know about e-cigarette use among teens in Montana. According to the 2017 Montana Youth Risk Behavior Survey, 47% of Montana high schoolers report having tried e-cigarettes, and 23% of students say they currently use them. Compare the number of Montana teens who say they're using e-cigarettes to the number of Montana adults who use them, and there's a dramatic difference, 23% of teens compared to just 4% of adults. E-cigarettes have also taken over other traditional types of tobacco products. Twice as many students say they use e-cigarettes compared to cigarettes, cigars, and smokeless tobacco. Several guests are joining me today to discuss e-cigarette use among Montana teens. We have Dr. Greg Holzman, the State Medical Officer for Montana, Nicole Ani, Program Manager for the Montana Tobacco Use Prevention Program, and Corporal Domingo Zapata with Helena Police Department, who helps supervise the school resource officers. Thank you all so much for being with us this morning.
Thanks
Let's
for having us.
talk, Dr. Holzman, first of all, for those who aren't familiar with e-cigarettes, what can you tell us about what they are?
Well, they're a new device to deliver nicotine, in a real simple way to say about it, but different from combustible cigarettes, which is a burning product. This is a liquid that is heated up into an aerosol. And notice that I use the word aerosol instead of vapor, because it's not just water, as people like to say with vapor. It's an aerosol that has all the chemicals that are in that. That is what people suck in when they take a deep breath with it, and then the nicotine goes straight into the brain. So really quickly, you get the nicotine into your brain that increases the risk of addiction.
And Nicole, you have some of the devices here. Maybe we should just look at those briefly so people can get a sense of just how different they can appear.
Right, e-cigarettes come in all different shapes and sizes, so it's really important, especially if you work in the schools or if you're a parent, that you know all the different types of e-cigarettes that are out there. There are some that are really big, like these mod devices, and these produce a huge cloud of aerosol. These are not as commonly used by youth. The more commonly used products that we have by youth are what are called vape pens, and they look a lot like a pen. So I have a little pencil bag right here, and if you threw it in here with some other pens and markers and you were just looking in here, I mean, you wouldn't be able to realize that it is an e-cigarette versus a pen. It looks just like one. But one of the more commonly used e-cigarettes among youth is a Juul, and it looks a lot like a flash drive. It looks like a USB device, and it actually does charge by plugging into your computer. And they're really sleek, easy to hide. So they do come in a lot of different ways. I don't believe one is, oh, there is one in here. There are also cigalikes that are designed to look just like a cigarette. And that was essentially the original intention of designing these e-cigarettes, is to mimic a cigarette. So you have these ones that look just like it.
So, Dr. Holzman, in the beginning of when these became devices, were they intended, or it seemed like they were more for helping people overcome traditional cigarettes or to kind of wean themselves off, but this really seems like it's taking over and just replacing that.
Yeah, I think, who knows what the exact reasoning was that they first came about and when they came into the United States. But at this point in time, although it's played off sometimes as a way to quit tobacco, the data for the U.S. has been very inconclusive about that, and I can give you lots of reasons why I don't use that as a treatment model, because most of the time it ends up the person substitutes if at the best situation. So they continue on the nicotine and they continue on these extras and they never get off of it. And then we start getting dual users that are still using the combustible and the e-cigarettes, and that's a real problem. So it's changed a lot. We have 7 FDA approved medications that can help you quit, and that's where I would go.
That's where you need, folks to go. Let's talk then about these dramatic numbers for youth. And this really seems like it's in the last couple of years that it's become this really skyrocketing problem. What can you tell us about Montana kids and using these products?
I think there's a lot of things that play into this too, and Nicole might want to talk about this too, but it's a new product. It's cool. There's a lot of things. You can go onto the internet and see all these vaping things of showing how to do different things with the smoke, you know, making the smoke circles and all this kind of stuff. Everybody keeps hearing that it's safer than regular cigarettes, and I think that's being equated to many people as safe, which it's not, especially for youth. We have some pretty good data on that. That's playing into it. And then once you get on it, 99% of e-cigarettes have a nicotine in it. And those are the ones people are going to be addicted once they continue to use, and then they have a really hard time getting off. So I think it all kind of plays into it, and there's probably some other things too that I might have missed. I don't know.
Right, to add to what Dr. Holzman just said, that most e-cigarettes that are sold do contain nicotine, but the reality is, and what we know from some data that has been shared, is that most youth who are using e-cigarettes are actually not aware that they do contain nicotine. So they're using these products and they're becoming addicted to them unknowingly. And some of the other factors that are appealing to youth, the fact that e-cigarettes and e-juice, which I do have a sample of that as well, this is Skittles e-juice, they come in over 15,500 different flavors. And they are in flavors that appeal to kids, like Fruit Loops, Skittles, root beer floats, chocolate. There's all these different flavors that are appealing to kids, and they see those flavors, they want to try them out. And there's a lot of data out there that show that kids are trying products, these tobacco products, for the first time because they come in flavors that they like.
And of course, along with the nicotine, there's so many other chemicals in there, and that's really part of it as well, is what is the impact on their health for all these other things that are in these products.
Yeah, that plays a lot into it. And so most products have a flavoring, most products have the nicotine, and then they might have glycol prolol, I'm misstating that, I'm sorry, acrolein, or some of the other chemicals that can have different effects. And a lot of it we're still trying to learn on that. You know, they don't have the 7,000 different chemicals that combustible cigarettes do, but they have other things that are in there, and they have high metals, like can they have lead or tin, that are all can be in these things that people are inhaling. The other thing that I think a lot of people misunderstand is they talk about GRAS, which is generally okay, they just take, relatively safe, but that's talking about ingestion, not inhalation, and there's differences on that. And so you have things like cinnamon or vanillin, or even this thing called diacetyl, which is the popcorn flavoring. Ingesting it, people do okay. If you inhale it, they can cause some problems. So it plays all into it.
Let's talk a little bit, Corporal Zapata, about we're talking in this case about Helena schools, but tell us about what you're seeing as a school resource officer in our schools. Are we talking middle schools, high schools?
So the state legislature amended the state code for tobacco products in 2015, and it went in effect in 2016. Since then, we've seen a big increase in the amount of reports coming from the middle schools, showing that the demographic is seemingly geared towards the younger kids. And then overall, our reports have increased at least 33 to 40%. Because of the vape products. That's not necessarily saying it's just vapes only. We're seeing a lot of dual use, more with the high schoolers. They still want their chewing tobacco, they still have their cigarettes, but the concealability and the availability to use it without having the normal ashtray smell has been one of the main, I would say, reasons why the kids choose the vape product, as well as some of the other reasons that have been mentioned.
In terms of what a consequence would be for the kids who you catch with these products, what happens in those situations where someone has them? So
typically the SROs, we're working in the schools, so the youth is usually getting caught in the schools. So you do have some school consequences, whether that be in school or out of school suspension and the like. But as far as a criminal offense here in Helena, they get cited and have to appear in municipal court, and then the judge on a first first offense, I just talked to him this week, it's a $135 fine plus 10 hours community service, and it goes up for every other offense up to 30 to 40 hours community service and an additional increase in the monetary amount.
And that may be something that teenagers, young people are not aware of, really looking at the consequences of something that they may not understand is really on par with any other tobacco that they may be caught with, if they're caught with chew or smoking cigarettes. Do you feel like there's a disconnect among the kids in understanding really what this is that they have and what they're doing?
Yeah, they don't understand it. They see it as something totally different. They see it as a vapor, as a liquid. I'm just inhaling flavored water. And they really don't understand that this is, it's a violation of state law, but there is addictive chemicals. Nicotine is in there, and this is why the state legislature felt that it was important to include these types of products as part of the tobacco law. And our issue, our point with the SROs is not only dealing with these situations as they come about, but getting into the classrooms and educating the kids. We try to start that in the elementary schools and then continue that through middle school and even high school.
And Nicole, then that's a good point to kind of add on there is where does the education component come in, and how do you almost overcome something that has grown so fast to really start to get back to that education aspect?
Right, and that's the challenging thing with the tobacco industry, is that they are constantly adapting their products to addict new users. So we're always trying to catch up to the new things that they're putting out there. And there is a lot of education that is being done throughout the state, a lot in the schools. We do have tobacco prevention specialists that are located in almost every single county throughout the state, and they're really tasked with raising the awareness in their communities on the risks associated with e-cigarette use. So they may be doing presentations in schools, they may be doing presentations to youth groups, they'll meet with providers about e-cigarette use and resources to help people quit. And we have a lot of work that is being done with the schools. We contract with the Office of Public Instruction, and they have been working with schools across the state to help them adopt comprehensive tobacco-free school policies. In the state law right now, only tobacco use is prohibited on school campuses, and right now that doesn't include e-cigarettes in the definition. So a part of these comprehensive tobacco-free school policies is prohibiting the use of e-cigarettes on school campuses. So there's been a lot of work not only helping schools adopt these new policies, but also helping them understand what curriculum is available to integrate into their teachings about e-cigarettes and the dangers associated with them, and just educating school personnel about what e-cigarettes look like, what to look for, and why they're dangerous.
I would like to add one thing on about what was both said by my colleagues here, but we talk about education for the kids and all that, and that's very important, but also education for the parents. And they can get very frustrated when they find out their child is using an e-cigarette and scold them and do these different things. But just remember, the kid might already be addicted. So that's something to know and think about as you're working with them to help them get off of using this product and moving forward. So, are
there signs that parents should be looking for, or is it really just if they see the device? It seems as if it's not like they walk in and there's a smell, or they can see it in their in their mouth or something like that. What are some ways that parents might be able to clue into whether their child is taking part in this?
One of the biggest things I would say is ask. Just ask them, let them know it's a very popular thing. Many of their friends are using it, or other people they know. I think when you get into the high school age group, there's probably very few high schoolers who don't know somebody that might be using it. So just have that conversation. It doesn't always have to be punitive. Sometimes that just works a little bit better, and make sure that they understand what are the long-term risks. Even if the long-term risk, one of the things would be being addicted to something that you just constantly need to pay for. Do you want to be paying that out of your pocket? Continuously in your 30s and 40s for something you really don't want, but you just feel like you have to.
And it does seem like, as there's so many things that we talk to our children about, different types of drugs or other social issues, but that this is really just one more of those things, that open conversation really is just sitting around the dinner table or sitting around on a Saturday and talking about it. Can you give folks some advice on having those conversations? Is it really just hey, tell me what you know about this, or have you seen it?
I think it is being open and honest, and just taking that time and not being judgmental on what they're doing. And especially, this is a new product that there is a lot of confusion around. A lot of adults are confused around this product. So first and foremost, the parents should be educating themselves. And there's a lot of great resources out there. The Surgeon General has put out a lot of wonderful resources specifically targeted towards parents to help them understand the risks, so that when they do sit down and talk with their children and their kids, that they really know what's going on, because then they can effectively communicate to their kids what the risks are.
And with educating yourself, I would say make sure you trust your sources and don't just look at, obviously we're talking about the health effects, and those are great, but there's also other effects with these types of products. I mean, these products, there's studies showing that they are blowing up. They are, you know, combusting in people's pockets, so there's that injury that you could face there, and that's something that gets overlooked a lot of times, so they need to make sure that they know that and know how to explain that to their child, that there's, even if you're not using it with your buddies, if you're carrying it for your friends, you run that risk of it possibly going off in your pocket.
Now, one question I think that is probably on a lot of parents' minds is the access, and where are they getting this? So I'm not sure who wants to speak to that, or if you all have maybe some aspect of that, but we see the commercials, we see some of those shops, but are kids just walking in and getting this?
That is such a good question, and it's a question we get asked all the time, and I have to be honest that it's not a straightforward answer. They're getting them in a lot of different ways. Some of the data that we've gotten back from the Youth Risk Behavior Survey says that the majority of kids borrow them from their friends, but where are their friends getting them? You do have some kids who are 18 and over, who are still in high school, that can legally actually purchase these products and hand them off to their friends. Sometimes that happens. They could be getting them online. Sometimes they can be getting them from parents. Unfortunately, I've heard that, which is that's really concerning. And some of them are actually getting them directly from the convenience store and buying them in the stores. There's a new study that came out from the Truth Initiative showing that nearly 3 out of 4 Juul users are getting them from convenience stores.
Which then enters into a whole other realm of education for those who are tasked with selling it, that they also need to be informed about who they're selling these products to. Is there consequences for someone who's selling those to someone who's too young?
There are consequences with the Department of Public Health and Human Services. They have fines in place for situations like that, because it is illegal to sell to anyone that's under the age of 18. Unfortunately, that's kind of complaint-based driven. We have to know about it in order to investigate it. Sometimes they do their own individual operations and they handle it that way, but we need people to be reporting this so that we have information and we know where to go looking where these convenience stores may be doing it unlawfully. Again, it just goes back to the old adage, see something, say something.
Yeah.
And there's been some new legislation, what we think about what's happened with cigarettes, but not with e-cigarettes at this point in time. So putting it behind the counter, I mean, people can just lift it and possibly steal it. Might be one way of putting it in. The flavors is always an issue, and the advertising. Yeah. You can't advertise for combustible cigarettes on TV and radio, but you can with e-cigarettes.
And that does seem like something that's happened here in the last couple of months. I know here we've reported several times that on a national level, they're talking more about where those things are placed and making sure that they're kept in different locations. And it's just interesting to kind of follow how explosive this has been and how this has grown to a point where all of a sudden it's sort of trying to dial back the damage that's already been done. And then talk a little bit, I guess, now going back to the health impacts and really sort of the key here to not getting someone hooked on nicotine at such a young age, because from then on out, getting off of that is much more difficult.
Right. I think there's two aspects on health. One, we'll talk about what's happening to the youth brain that we already know. So, the brain is still developing up to the age of 25. And with that, it changes, it has effects on the circuitry, can have effects with attention or impulse control, mood disorders. All these things are things that have been associated and we're looking at. So there's that concern right then. It's an easier ability that you might have more susceptibility to addiction later in life, not just to this. So those are the aspects in one area that health that we can talk about currently. The other is the long-term effects. And that's the big thing that we don't know, because propylene glycol is the word I was trying to get out earlier today, but things like that, there's aspects that are in there, and we're not sure what the long-term effects are going to actually be on these kids. And I use regular cigarettes as an example. You saw a huge rise at the turn of last century, and biggest increase probably between the 40s and 50s. We saw the biggest increase in cancer, lung cancer, coming in the 60s and 70s and 80s. So, that long-term effect, we're just waiting because we don't know.
Well, it's interesting to point that out as well, because when you talk about, say, advertising back in the 1940s and 50s, 30s, when it's healthy, they made it appear as if smoking cigarettes was a relaxing and good thing for you, and how we all look at that now through such a different lens, and how we're just kind of on the cusp of that. It's almost like history repeating itself. So the education component has to be such an incredibly important part of this. We keep going back to that education component. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit, I guess, about the Montana Tobacco Use Prevention Program and the importance of what you're doing here, whether that's about traditional tobacco or about e-cigarettes?
Right. One of the key goals of our program is to prevent youth from starting in the first place. And to get at what you were just talking about, one of the things that we do educate on, and we have developed media campaigns around this topic, is the tobacco industry's marketing tactics, and how they are using a lot of the same tactics over again from what they used in the beginning to advertise cigarettes. We're seeing a lot of those same tactics using cartoons, using celebrity endorsements, TV advertisements. We're seeing all those again with e-cigarettes. And as Dr. Holtzman mentioned, we don't know the long-term effects, so we may be facing the same thing in 10, 20 years that we did with cigarettes, and that would be really unfortunate. You have this whole generation of youth that are getting addicted to these products and using them, and we could see that come back as serious health consequences in the future, but we just don't know. So that's one thing that our program really takes to heart, to try to educate and bring awareness to the fact that the tobacco industry hasn't backed off. They're continuing to use their tactics to hook new users because they have to replace their dying customers. That's so key for them. So it's really important to make sure that when we're talking about tobacco use, it's not an old thing. This is very present, and it's a big concern right now. We need to make sure that everybody's still thinking about it and addressing it.
Commercial cigarettes beforehand, when we got to look at their internal data from the tobacco companies, they had a saying, hook 'em young, hook 'em for life. And this is what we're really concerned about happening right again. We know with combustible cigarettes, if you don't start smoking by the age of 19, the chances that you're going to start is really, really slim. And so seeing that whole youth and that whole area that we've made such strides on, and smoking rates that decreased so much in youth, now going back up, it's really fearful for us that work in the tobacco control areas.
Well, I believe that's something that not that long ago that you were talking about, is all of the progress made has now backtracked. You've gone back, and now you're sort of trying to climb that hill again. What can you tell us about the impact on Montanans' health, just in tobacco use in general, when we're talking about the number of people that we're losing every year, just in basics?
Yeah, in the United States, we know 1 out of 5 deaths are due to preventable, things of cigarettes. For every 1 death, there's 30 people suffering from a chronic tobacco-related illness. In Montana, there's 4,800,000 people that are dying from tobacco. It's in Montana, I think it's 1,600 deaths each year from tobacco-related illnesses. So it's a major problem, and something that we can do about. That's what's the most frustrating. We know what we need to do, and we could make a big difference. And the other thing I think is really important, people talk about freedom of choice, and I very much respect that, but 70% of the people that are currently smoking want to quit.
That's an incredible number.
That's an incredible number. So that shows you how addictive this is.
So then let's segue a little bit into that ability, that like the Montana Tobacco Quit line. Obviously, that's a resource that people can reach out to if they need help.
It's a great resource, and actually Nicole does more with that. I don't know if you want to talk about it.
Yeah, we're so lucky to have one of the best quit lines in the nation that has consistently high quit success rates. We actually just got our new report, and we have a 40% success rate. Now you might think that doesn't really sound that great. Well, when you compare it to somebody quitting completely on their own, their success rate is about 5 to 6%. So we're really increasing that, and we're doing that by combining coaching and developing a very clear quit plan, a quit date, and combining that with medications. So if you enroll in the Montana Tobacco Quit line, and you can do that by calling 1-800-QUIT-NOW. If you enroll in that, you get free coaching, and then you have access to free quit help. So you can have access to nicotine replacement therapy like gum, lozenges, and the patch. And then you'd also have access to reduced cost medications like Chantix and bupropion. And people who are calling into the quit line, they are setting themselves up for a lot more success with quitting in the long run. The thing with quitting is most people are making 7 to nearly 10 quit attempts. It takes a long time, and it takes continuing to try. Don't give up. It's never too late to quit. You can see the benefits of quitting almost immediately. It starts to lower your blood pressure, and then very soon after, a year after, your risk of heart attack decreases. So it's just so important to continue to try to take those steps. One thing I do want to mention with the quit line, as we're on the topic of e-cigarettes, is that they do help people quit e-cigarettes and other tobacco products, smokeless tobacco, cigars. They help with all forms of tobacco products. So if you are somebody who's addicted to e-cigarettes, you can call into the quit line and they can help you. And they do help with kids too. So if you're 13 and older and you're addicted to the quit line, I wish. If you're addicted to nicotine, you can call into the quit line and they'll help you. And that can be anonymous too. They won't let your parents know that you're calling into the quit line and needing to quit.
Can you give that number one more time?
Yep, it's 1-800-QUIT-NOW.
1-800-QUIT-NOW. All right. Thank you all so much for being with us today. There's a lot of information here, and of course many resources online for people to access and continue to educate and support one another as they try and quit tobacco products. Thank you so much for being with us, and thank you for watching today. Next week we will have another Montana newsmaker, and will be our guest. Until then, have a great week. Thanks for joining us.
You've been watching Face the State, a presentation of MTN, the Montana Television Network.